Hello and welcome to day 80 in the Not Alone Today Chronological Bible Reading Plan with Joseph and Anu. Today we begin a new book, the book of 1 Samuel, and we will be reading the first 6 chapters today. But before we get into that, just a quick overview of the book. 1 Samuel is a very interesting book that brings us the transition from where we left off in the book of Judges and Ruth in those days when there was no king in Israel. So we begin to see that transition from the era of just loose tribal confederation, people leading and ruling themselves as they deem fit, sometimes led by judges, to Israel becoming a nation that has its own king, a monarchy in that sense. There are 3 major figures that the book centers on, beginning with Samuel, who will be the final judge, the last judge. The last judge we read about was Samson, and then in this book, we're going to see Samuel acting in some sense in the role of a judge and also a very great prophet. And he is the one that God will use to guide that transition. Saul is the other character. He's going to be the first king and he's going to ultimately fail God. I remember reading a reflection from Max Lucado many years ago, I think about the entire book of 1 Samuel, saying it's a book of many people who started well but did not finish well, including Samuel and then of course Saul. And then the third character is David, the young shepherd boy that would be secretly anointed to become Saul's replacement. And the rest of the book, from around the middle point thereof to the end, zooms in to focus on David and how he kept trying to evade or escape Saul, who became jealous of him and wanting to kill him. Eventually, at the end of the book, Saul will commit suicide during a disastrous battle against the Philistines, and he would also lose his son, Jonathan, who by now has become David's best friend, more or less. So it's a book with a lot of tensions and stories and lots of things to unpack. Obviously, at some point in the book, we will be drawn into the book of Psalms, especially as we begin the story of David, knowing that David wrote a good number of the Psalms. So some of the Psalms will begin to come up as we progress in the story. Don't be taken aback by that. But yeah, we are ready to dive into the book of 1 Samuel, and we begin with chapter 1.
Chapter 1. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zuphite, from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zoph, an Ephraimite. He had 2 wives. One was called Hannah, and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none.
Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Ophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever they came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, "Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?"
Once, when they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. In a deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, "Lord Almighty, if you would only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will be used on his head."
As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk and said to her, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine."
"Not so, my lord," Hannah replied. "I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief."
Eli answered, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him."
She said, "May your servant find favor in your eyes." Then she went away and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast.
Early the next morning, they arose and worshipped before the Lord, and then went back to their home at Ramah. Elkanah made love to his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, "Because I asked the Lord for him."
When her husband Elkanah went up with all his family to offer the annual sacrifice to the Lord and to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, "After the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always."
"Do what seems best to you," her husband Elkanah told her. "Stay here until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord make good his word." So the woman stayed at home and nursed her son until she had weaned him.
After he was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli. And she said to him, "Pardon me, my lord. As surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he shall be given over to the Lord." And he worshipped the Lord there.
Chapter 2. Then Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance."
There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God.
Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance. For the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed.
The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hired themselves out for food, but those who were hungry are hungry no more. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away.
The Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and raises up. The Lord sends poverty and wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He sets them with princes and makes them inherit a throne of honor.
For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. On them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful servants, but the wicked will be silenced in the place of darkness.
It is not by strength that anyone prevails. Those who oppose the Lord will be broken. The Most High will thunder from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth.
He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed.
Then Elkanah went home to Ramah. But the boy ministered before the Lord under Eli, the priest.
Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. Now, it was the practice of the priest that whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest's servants would come with a 3-pronged fork in his hand while the meat was being boiled, and would plunge the fork into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. Whatever the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is how they treated all the Israelites who came to Shiloh. But even before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the person who was sacrificing, "Give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw."
If the person said to him, "Let the fat be burnt first, and then take whatever you want," the servant would answer, "No, hand it over now. If you don't, I'll take it by force."
The sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt.
But Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. Each year, his mother made him a little robe and took it to him when she went up with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife, saying, "May the Lord give you children by this woman, to take the place of the one she prayed for and gave to the Lord." Then they would go home, and the Lord was gracious to Hannah. She gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord.
Now Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So he said to them, "Why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these wicked deeds of yours. No, my sons, the report I hear spreading among the Lord's people is not good. If one person sins against another, God may mediate for the offender. But if anyone sins against the Lord, who will intercede for them?" His sons, however, did not listen to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death.
And the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and in favor with the Lord and with the people.
Now, a man of God came to Eli and said to him, "This is what the Lord says. Did I not clearly reveal myself to your ancestors' family when we were in Egypt under Pharaoh? I chose your ancestor out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, and to wear an ephod in my presence. I also gave your ancestors' family all the food offerings presented by the Israelites. Why do you scorn my sacrifice and offering that I prescribed for my dwelling? Why do you honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choice parts of every offering made by my people Israel?"
Therefore, the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, "I promised that members of your family would minister before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me. Those who honor me, I will honor, but those who despise me will be disdained. The time is coming when I will cut short your strength and the strength of your priestly house, so that no one in it will reach old age, and you will see distress in my dwelling. Although good will be done to Israel, no one in your family line will ever reach old age. Every one of you that I do not cut off from serving at my altar, I will spare only to destroy your sight and sap your strength, and all your descendants will die in the prime of life."
And what happens to your 2 sons, Ophni and Phinehas, will be a sign to you. They will both die on the same day. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his priestly house, and they will minister before my anointed one always. Then everyone left in your family line will come and bow down before him for a piece of silver and a loaf of bread, and plead, "Appoint me to some priestly office so that I can have food to eat."
Chapter 3. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions.
One night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord, where the ark of the Lord was. The Lord called to Samuel.
Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me."
Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down.
Again the Lord called, "Samuel." And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me."
"My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down."
Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him.
A third time the Lord called, "Samuel." And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me."
Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down. And if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place.
The Lord came and stood there, calling us at other times, "Samuel, Samuel."
Then Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening."
And the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears it tingle. At that time, I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I told him I would judge his family forever. Because of the sin he knew about, his sons uttered blasphemies against God, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore, I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house would never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering."
Samuel lay down until morning and then opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli the vision. But Eli called him and said, "Samuel, my son."
Samuel answered, "Here I am."
"What was it he said to you?" Eli asked. "Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide from me anything he told you." So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing from him. Then Eli said, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes."
The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of Samuel's words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word.
Chapter 4. And Samuel's word came to all Israel.
Now the Israelites went out to fight against the Philistines. The Israelites camped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines at Ephek. The Philistines deployed their forces to meet Israel, and as the battle spread, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 of them on the battlefield. When the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord bring defeat on us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh, that it may go with us and save us from the hands of our enemies."
So the people sent men to Shiloh, and they brought back the ark of the covenant of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim. And Eli's two sons, Ophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God.
When the ark of the Lord's covenant came into the camp, all Israel raised such a great shout that the ground shook. Hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, "What's all this shouting in the Hebrew camp?"
When they learned that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. "A god has come into the camp," they said. "Oh no, nothing like this has happened before. We are doomed. Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness. Be strong, Philistines, be men, or you will be subject to the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Be men and fight."
So the Philistines fought, and the Israelites were defeated, and every man fled to his tent. The slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. The ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Ophni and Phinehas, died.
That same day, a Benjaminite ran from the battle line and went to Shiloh with his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he arrived, there was Eli sitting on his chair by the side of the road, watching, because his heart feared for the ark of God. When the man entered the town and told what had happened, the whole town sent up a cry.
Eli heard the outcry and asked, "What is the meaning of this uproar?"
The man hurried over to Eli, who was 98 years old and whose eyes had failed so that he could not see. He told Eli, "I have just come from the battle line. I fled from it this very day."
Eli asked, "What happened, my son?"
The man who brought the news replied, "Israel fled before the Philistines, and the army has suffered heavy losses. Also your two sons, Ophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured."
When he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell backwards off his chair by the side of the gate. His neck was broken and he died, for he was an old man and he was heavy. He had led Israel for 40 years.
His daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant and near the time of delivery. When she heard the news that the ark of God had been captured and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she went into labor and gave birth, but was overcome by her labor pains. As she was dying, the women attending her said, "Don't despair, you have given birth to a son." But she did not respond or pay any attention.
She named the boy Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel, because of the capture of the ark of God and the death of her father-in-law and husband." She said, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured."
Chapter 5. After the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon falling on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. They took Dagon and put him back in his place. But the following morning, when they rose, there was Dagon falling on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. His head and hands had been broken off and were lying on the threshold. Only his body remained. That is why to this day, neither the priests of Dagon nor any others who enter Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold.
The Lord's hand was heavy on the people of Ashdod and its vicinity. He brought devastation on them and afflicted them with tumors. When the people of Ashdod saw what was happening, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not stay here with us, because his hand is heavy on us and on Dagon our God." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and asked them, "What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?"
They answered, "Let the ark of the God of Israel be moved to Gath." So they moved the ark of the God of Israel.
But after they had moved it, the Lord's hand was against that city, throwing it into great panic. He afflicted the people of the city, both young and old, with an outbreak of tumors. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron.
As the ark of God was entering Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, "They have brought the ark of the God of Israel round to us to kill us and our people." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and said, "Send the ark of the God of Israel away. Let it go back to its own place, or it will kill us and our people." For death had filled the city with panic. God's hand was very heavy on it. Those who did not die were afflicted with tumors, and the outcry of the city went up to heaven.
Chapter 6. When the ark of the Lord had been in Philistine territory for 7 months, the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us how we should send it back to its place."
They answered, "If you return the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it back to him without a gift. By all means, send a guilt offering to him. Then you will be healed, and you will know why his hand has not been lifted from you."
The Philistines asked, "What guilt offering should we send to him?"
They replied, 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats, according to the number of the Philistine rulers, because the same plague has struck both you and your rulers. Make models of the tumors and of the rats that are destroying the country, and give glory to Israel's God. Perhaps he will lift his hand from you and your gods and your land. Why do you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh did? When Israel's God dealt harshly with them, they did not send the Israelites out so that they could go on their way.
Now then, get a new cart ready with 2 cows that have been calved and have never been yoked. Hitch the cows to the cart, but take their calves away and pen them up. Take the ark of the Lord and put it on the cart, and in a chest beside it, put the gold objects you're sending back to him as a guilt offering. Send it on its way, but keep watching it. If it goes up to its own territory, towards Beth Shemesh, then the Lord has brought this great disaster on us. But if it does not, then we shall know that it was not his hand that struck us, but that it happened to us by chance.
So they did this. They took 2 such cows and hitched them to the cart and penned up their calves. They placed the ark of the Lord on the cart, and along with it the chest containing the gold rats and the models of the tumors. Then the cows went straight up towards Beth Shemesh, keeping on the road and lowing all the way. They did not turn to the right or to the left. The rulers of the Philistines followed them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh.
Now the people of Beth Shemesh were harvesting their wheat in the valley, and when they looked up and saw the ark, they rejoiced at the sight. The cart came to the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh, and there he stopped beside a large rock. The people chopped up the wood of the carts and sacrificed the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord together with the chest containing the gold objects and placed them on the large rock. On that day, the people of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and made sacrifices to the Lord. The 5 rulers of the Philistines saw all this and then returned that same day to Ekron.
These are the gold tumors the Philistines sent as a guilt offering to the Lord, 1 each for Ashdod, Gaza, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. And the number of the gold rats was according to the number of Philistine towns belonging to the 5 rulers, the fortified towns with their country villages. The large rock on which the Levites set the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh.
But God struck down some of the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh, putting 70 of them to death, because they looked into the ark of the Lord. The people mourned because of the heavy blow the Lord had dealt them. And the people of Beth Shemesh asked, "Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? To whom will the ark go up from here?"
Then they sent messengers to the people of Kiriath Jearim, saying, "The Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to your town." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Just a quick summary of the 6 chapters we've read today. In chapter 1, we read about the birth of Samuel, how that Hannah dedicated Samuel to God. And then chapter 2 started with Hannah's prayer, where she exalted God. And then we read about the wickedness of Eli's sons, how they showed contempt to the sacrifices that was brought to God's house, and how they slept with the women who came to serve at the tent of meeting. Eli rebuked them, but the sons did not change because it was God's will to put them to death. Then God prophesied against the house of Eli. A man came to Eli and told him what will happen to him. Then chapter 3, we read about how God called Samuel and how Eli supported him by helping him to say that it was God calling him. And then Samuel told Eli what God has prophesied. And Eli said, let God do what he wants, what is good in his eyes. Chapter 4 started with the Philistines capturing the Ark of the Covenant. And then we read about the death of Eli and also about the death of his sons. Then chapter 5, we read about how that when the Philistines took the Ark of God to their towns, God's hand was heavy on them, so much that they were afflicted with tumors. And then chapter 6, the Philistines decided to return the Ark of God back to its place. And when it came to Beth-Shemesh, the people rejoiced, but then the Lord's hand was heavy on the people, and 70 died because they looked into the Ark of God. And that chapter ended with the people of Beth-Shemesh asking the people of Kiriath Jearim to come take up the Ark of the Covenant. So going to chapter 1, I will just pick out points that stood out to us. What stood out to me in chapter 1 is in verse 22, how that it was Hannah who told her husband that the boy will be taken to be presented to God and will live there always. She took that decision. And then her husband just shrugged and said, do what seems best to you. I just like her intentionality in not forgetting her vow and giving the boy back to the Lord. Yeah.
If her husband had refused, remember we've read about this as well, she would have been freed from that vow. But of course, in the husband saying, do what seems best to you, then the vow remains binding, and she needed to fulfill that vow. And that was, that's quite striking. Yeah. In chapter 2, there are many lines in Anna's prayer that stood out to me. There's a chorus that we've always sung in my church growing up. There is none holy like the Lord. There is none besides him. I didn't know that was part of Anna's prayer. It just sounds like a beautiful worship song. But yeah, Hannah gave us those words, and that's beautiful. But the line that actually caught my attention most is in the latter part of verse 3, where it says, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. There is nothing that escapes him. He's omniscient in that sense. And anytime God gives counsel, he gives counsel from his omniscience, from the fact that he knows not as much as we know. He knows way much more than we know. Past, present, and future, all at the same time are just very clear in his sight, and that gives perspective to how we should respond, even when what God is saying sometimes doesn't make sense to us. It doesn't have to. It doesn't make sense to us because we don't have the knowledge that he has.
True that.
What stood out to you in chapter 2?
In chapter 2, the first verse stood out to me when Hannah said, my mouth boasts over my enemy, for I delight in your deliverance. In my head, in Yoruba, most of Yoruba Christian songs, it's always about our God. Give me this victory so that my enemy can see and know that you are God. And I've always thought, why is everything about the enemy seeing? Like it's as though we just want that deliverance so that the enemy sees, so that we can boast and show that, hey, I have God. I didn't realize it was a universal thing, and it was just limited to my culture. If Anna is saying that my mouth boasts over my enemies, it's indicative that I will show them. No, I don't know if it's I will show them, or because for you to boast over someone to say, hey, Shebi, you were saying something, this is me now. It was just very interesting to see that. And then the other part that stood out to me that was quite, what's the word? quite comforting was that Samuel, a boy, wore linen ephod. That's verse 18.
Yeah.
Ephod is a priestly garment meant to be worn by priests like adults. But from a little age, just picture a 6-year-old boy wearing an ephod. And this ephod are not just ordinary garments, they're like heavy garments with stones, and they're quite precise. And I like that each year his mother made him a little robe and take it to him. It's just beautiful. I don't know why it's beautiful. It is just beautiful. In that from a little age, he had already accepted his priesthood and was working in the same, despite of the rot that was going on around him. Because he could have chosen to copy the sons of Eli, but in the accounts we're given, it was as though he faced his own task as instructed and did not deviate from that, and it's quite instructive for me.
Indeed. I also like those phrases. Twice it was said the boy grew up. Once he said in the presence of the Lord, and in another time he continued to grow in verse 26 in stature and in favor with the Lord and with people, which is exactly what was said of Jesus in Luke chapter 2.
Yes.
Very, very striking.
Just one last thing that stood out to me was how that Eli, we read that he rebuked his sons by telling them, if you sin against God, you know who will atone for you. But then God said he honored the sons more than him by fattening themselves in the choice part of the offering made by the people. So basically, Eli must have been eating from the spoils.
He was complicit, what
that
they
his sons were bringing.
He fed on it as well.
And that was quite troubling.
Indeed, I liked that as well. Chapter 3, again, what caught my attention there is Eli's flippancy in the response to, even when God has communicated with Samuel and Samuel has told him what God has said, then Eli said, he says in verse 18, then Eli said, he is the Lord, let him do what is good in his eyes. There is a resignedness, a resoluteness, and helplessness, and flippancy, all finding expression in that comment. I don't know whether he's just tired of, wanting to correct his sons, or he's just too old to do anything anymore. But any response but that might have made sense. But to just say, it's the Lord, let him do what he likes, is quite concerning.
True. I highlighted that as well. And what stood out to me mostly in chapter 3 is verse 4. The Lord called Samuel, and Samuel answered, here I am, a boy. He knew he was called, and it shows his attention to detail, his astuteness, because he was lying down. And when he was called, he immediately answered. The 4 times he was called, he responded until he was directed to know that it was God. It's quite, what's the word? It's quite astonishing that at his boyhood, Samuel knew he was being called, and then he answered. And every time he answered and he was sent back, that did not stop him from going back again to say, you called me, here I am. And there was no anger, there was no frustration. In the 3 times I went to Eli, I just kept going back to say, here I am, you called me. I found that very instructive.
Indeed. Chapter 4, when the Philistines captured the ark, it's just a very tragic chapter, both in terms of how many Israelites were lost in the battle, and then of course Ophni and Phinehas dying, and eventually Eli dying, and the daughter-in-law giving birth. And it just climaxes in that verse 21 when she gave that very sad name to the boy that she had, calling him Ichabod, which meant the glory has departed from Israel because of the capture of the ark. And I'm looking at that also symbolically in the sense of, what does the ark represent? It represents God's presence. And there are very many, there are many Christians that we don't care, so to speak, about the presence of God, whether God is with us or not, whether God goes with us or not. We just do life and roll on without having any intentional communications with him, any intentional check-ins with him, any intentional recalling to mind of God's presence. In such cases, it's as good as the glory has departed. It's a very troubling and tragic place to be, and something that should be concerning indeed.
True.
Yeah.
What stood out to me here was the daughter-in-law. How does she name the boy Ichabod? The glory of God has departed from Israel. And it brings to mind the importance of naming your child as led by God. I found out about a trend that when young people are pregnant these days, they go look in the Bible for the most unique name, and then name their child after that, or they would Google it. And it reads to me like, it's not about what sounds good, but what sounds, so what sounds, what's the word, urban, when you say, oh, my child is called XYZ, and it makes you feel good, and then people are, what's the meaning of that? It's about the child and not you. It's about what God is asking you. It's about the blueprint of the child's life. So the name symbolizes almost our names. It kind of forms who we are, informs us, so to say. So in naming our children, we should be careful not to go after what's popular, what's the trend, or what sounds good in our ears, what makes our ear tingle. But we should go after what we are led by God to name them, so that they then grow in that knowledge of who they are in God.
Indeed. Chapter 5, a very interesting chapter about the ark of God being in the temple of Dagon. And I love how Dagon kept falling up to the point where his head and his limbs were broken off. Because our God is not like any other God. You can't possibly bring a comparison. When the Philistines were initially giving an account amongst themselves regarding the fact that the ark of God had gotten to the camp of the Israelites, they were referring to that whole concept as gods. They've brought gods into their camp.
And they kept using G,
small G, because that was their own understanding. Okay, it's just like one of our gods. But then they realize here, which is probably why they just put him alongside Dagon. Let's put him with Dagon. He's another god. And then they realize that actually this is not like any other god that they've seen or they've experienced. So I just love the fact that God proved his incomparability in that chapter.
And then in chapter 6, when they were going to refer to God, they used the capital Lord.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, now you know. Now you know.
Now they realize.
And what stood out to me was how that they knew what's called the guilt offering. And that's quite instructive, in that the Israelites must have been practicing it within them, that they know what to do, or maybe God revealed it to the priests and diviners that they went to consult.
Possibly. I mean, the details of the guilt offering that they prescribed is quite funny compared to what God himself has instructed his people to do. And I love the fact that eventually when the cart and the ark came, they used the woods of the cart to then make a burnt offering and killed the two cows that brought it, and used that to make a burnt offering that will fit more into the prerequisites for what a guilt offering should look like to the Lord. Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. So thank you for joining us for day 80, and the journey continues on day 81 as we turn the page and we go further in the story in the book of 1 Samuel. But till then, just remember,
you're not alone.
You're not alone today.
God bless you.